Hi, folks. This is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz from Israel 365 News, coming at you live from the Golan. Today, we have a great guest, my dear friend David Rubin. He's the former mayor of Shiloh. He's the founder of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, which has a really intense story behind it. But more importantly, for our purposes today, he's the author of the amazing book Trump and the Jews. And here in Israel, and I think a lot of the pro-Israel people out there are really concerned about what's going to happen. Are we going to stay connected to Trump? Are we going to still stay connected to Israel? So, Dave, I'd like to thank you for being here with us. Before we jump in, could you give us the real quick version of why you started the Shiloh Children's Fund?
Well, I'll the real quick version. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
because I'll have you back on and we'll talk about that. But
okay, I'm checking my watch here. Okay, so I'll give you the shortest version that I possibly can. I think without losing the impact of the story, without understanding the impact of the story. This happened about I guess it was about 18 years ago, roughly. I was coming back from Jerusalem. I had my 3-year-old son with me in the car, and we were coming back to Shiloh, or Shiloh as most people in America would call it. And halfway home, the car was ambushed by Islamic terrorists who were on the side of the road. Terrorists from the Palestinian Authority. They were shooting at the car with AK-47 assault rifles. The car went completely dead when the bullets hit, and I had no idea what I could do. I saw bullets whizzing past my eyes. 4 bullets whizzed past my eyes, and then I was hit by a bullet in my left leg. Blood started pouring out all over the place. And the car was dead. The car wasn't moving. And I remembered that I had my 3-year-old son sitting behind me in the baby seat. I turned around to him. I asked him if he was okay. His eyes were staring straight forward. His mouth was wide open. No sounds were coming out. He looked like he was trying to scream or to cry, but no sounds were coming out. And it was the strangest thing. I figured he was just in shock from the shooting. And I didn't see any blood on him. Admittedly, it was a dark night, but I hit the gas and I turned the ignition and I tried to start the car over and over, shifting gears, park, drive, neutral. Finally, the car started. I got up the road to the next community, which is called Ofra, up the road. A gas station attendant came running to the car. He ripped off my shirt. He wrapped up my leg to stop the blood flow. And then about 2 minutes later, an ambulance pulled up. And they discovered that my son had been shot in the head, that a bullet had gone into his head where the skull meets with the neck, causing a skull fracture and internal bleeding in the cerebellum, we later found out. They wrapped his head with bandages, put an oxygen mask on his face, whisked both of us on stretchers into the ambulance, taking us to Jerusalem. And when we got to Jerusalem, I was pronounced the 1,000th victim of terrorism to be hospitalized just in that hospital and just in that previous year and a half. Well, they got to work on us. We had 2 operations, each of us, and a lot of, over the next months, there was psychological post-trauma therapy for my son, and thank God we recovered from that terrorist attack, and there were also some miracles involved that my son had a bullet go into his head where the skull meets with the neck, but it missed his brainstem by 1 millimeter. And the bullet that hit me in my leg hit my left leg, which enabled me to drive my automatic car because my right leg was untouched. And I was able to get to the ambulance. And last but not least, I get a call from the car mechanic, and he says to me, "David, why can't we start that car?" And he said, "There are 49 bullet holes in the car. I have no idea why we can't start the car because the bullet holes are inside the car." I said, look, well, what can I say? I mean, I've been believer in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for uh, going on 20 years, and going on 30 years, excuse me. And up until that very moment, I still had some of that old, shall we call it, New York City skepticism when it came to personal miracle stories. But I'm not a skeptic any longer, because I knew that I started that car after it wasn't starting, and I had to try over and over and over again. The car wasn't starting. Then finally the car started. I hit the gas. I drove 110 miles an hour to get to that ambulance. And look, I'm not a Catholic, but I'm going to make a confession. I've been a believer in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob over 30 years, as I just said. But I used to be skeptical. Every time I would hear a personal miracle story, I'd say, no, can't be. Well, we were just lifted up by the Almighty in His presence to get us to safety. And after that experience, after that entire experience that we went through, I had a vision, which was of a therapeutic educational campus for children, where children would be treated for all of the traumas that come from terrorism. And we've experienced it, when it happened to us personally. I already knew many, many families just in my neighborhood who had family members killed or wounded in terrorist attacks. And I said, no, I can't let this go without doing something about it. We have an expression in Hebrew that you guys probably know, Hakol L'Tovah, which means everything that happens for good. Now, we know bad things happen to good people, but everything happens for a good reason. Something good is supposed to come out of it. And so what came out of it was the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, for the purpose of healing the trauma of the terror victim children and rebuilding the biblical heartland of Israel through our therapeutic and educational projects.
So the reason why I asked you that, first of all, it's an amazing story, and unfortunately there are a lot of stories of real hashgacha prati, the really Hashem stepping in and helping people personally, and it's really it's something that I've seen. My wife was also really saved by a miracle from a terrorist attack, literally a miracle. And it's something that you cope with for years and years afterwards. But the reason why I specifically asked you, even though the subject of today is politics, is because I wanted to emphasize that politics for some people is a mental game, but for some people it is so real and touches them so personally. And and when I listen to you speak about issues having to do with the land of Israel and Judea and Samaria, it's you can hear that it's a step above just a nice political interest. For you, it's very personal and it's very spiritual, and I hear that in you. And I saw that a little bit in your books. And every time I interview you about these things, you're smart, you're powerful, but there's something else. And I think that something else is that you really have a spiritual and a personal interest in this.
David, if I can ask, what happened to the perpetrators of this attack?
Well, they eventually, it took a few years. They were eventually caught by the Israeli army, and they're in jail. They've been in jail for some 13, 14 years now. But it's interesting to point out that
they've been accruing interest. They've been accruing.
It's more than interest. It's more than interesting. It's shocking that they've been in jail, but their families are receiving their salaries from the Palestinians, from the official Palestinian Authority that supposedly made peace with Israel. And that's the same Palestinian Authority that current President Joe Biden has reestablished relations with after President Trump had broken those relations. For that very reason, he broke the relationship because they were refusing to stop the salary payments to the terrorists.
See, now we're getting down to it, and this is definitely like, it's funny that we jump. It's not funny. It's significant that you jump straight from a personal account and your personal interest right into politics, because in this case, the politics had a very direct effect. Did you see? I was shocked that Donald Trump won, and I was shocked that it really had such an impact on Israel and America. Did you feel the difference between the Trump administration and the Obama administration?
Are you serious, Eliyahu?
I know, but you're the expert. So
Look. The 8 years of Obama were a literal nightmare for the state of Israel. And look, I have to tell you honestly, okay? I made Aliyah. I moved to the land of Israel 28 years ago. But I did not vote and I'm a dual citizen. I'm a dual American-Israeli citizen. I did not vote in an American election until, as an Israeli citizen, as a dual citizen. I did not vote in an Israeli election until Obama was running in 2008. Why? Because I knew his background. I knew the threat to Israel, and I knew the threat to the United States. And both of those threats really bothered me. Everyone was saying it's great, first black president, it's wonderful if he gets elected. I said, no, we have to judge him by his background, by the content of its character, and by his goals. And it was clear to me that his goals were quite nefarious when it came to Israel and the Middle East. And that was the problem. So, the relationship was tense from the very beginning for 8 years. He treated the Israeli prime minister like garbage when he came to the White House, like an enemy. The tension was palpable all the way through. And then Trump came in, this out-of-the-box New Yorker, talking like a little bit like a crazy New Yorker. But he came into office with a tremendous heart for Israel, with a tremendous feeling of wanting to strengthen the relationship between the United States and Israel.
The key word I really liked that you used was he came in with a heart. It wasn't business, it wasn't politics, it wasn't interest. It was a real heart thing. He put his heart into it.
Yes, it was a heart thing, but it was also a little bit based on his business sense, because he came in like the pragmatic businessman that he was, and he said, okay, the Middle East is a puzzle. They've been banging their land for peace heads against the wall for some 40 years. Nobody is succeeding with this peace process. Let's try something different. And he came in and he said, okay, we'll try something different. He was open to suggestions. He was open to ideas. And he was open to listening. And, he's a guy who likes to talk, but he was open to listening. And that was very positive. And we see the accomplishments one after the other, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing the sovereign, the strategic Golan Heights as sovereign Israeli territory, stopping the payments to the Palestinians until they stop the payments to the terrorists, recognizing that the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, are not illegal. On and on and on and on. Tremendous,
when you
tremendous
talk about
accomplishment.
accomplishments, it's kind of scary. Even if you disagree with those things, the accomplishments, what came out of it was, even for me, it was astounding. It's like everyone in every country in the Middle East is lining up to make peace with Israel. It's like, who would have figured? And no one is recognizing that. No one is recognizing that accomplishment. It reminds me of when Obama said, how are you going to bring manufacturing jobs back? You have a magic wand. Well, he had a magic wand for the manufacturing jobs, brought them back, and he had a magic wand for the peace in the Middle East that everyone said could not be done.
Well, look, Trump proved himself. True, we know he's not a very academic guy. Okay, he's not I don't know how many books he reads a year. Probably not that much. I would guess. And I don't know if he even read my book, even though he knows about it. But Trump has a sense for what works. And he truly had a sense for what would work in this situation. And he proved himself. He really came in with a different attitude than any past American president. And it truly was phenomenal. Truly was phenomenal what he was able to accomplish, what he was able to do with his pragmatism, but with his vision also. And it was just great. It was just great. And we're going to miss him, because now we have Biden. Biden, when Trump announced that he was recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving the embassy, Biden was one of the people who said, no, don't do that. It'll be the biggest mistake. And the warnings were coming in fast and furious. There are going to be riots. The Palestinians are going to be upping the ante with their terrorism. There are going to be more terrorist attacks. Everything is going to happen all at once. The Middle East is going to blow up, and there are going to be Palestinian bombs on the Temple Mount. Everything was predicted. What happened? No, the riots didn't break out. No, the terrorism didn't break out. What broke out was peace.
I was fortunate enough, David, to
suddenly
be
wanting to make
that
peace
day.
with Israel. What was different?
I was fortunate enough that day to be at the event of the opening of the embassy, and we drove by. We had special buses that took us to the event, and we drove by the Damascus gate of the old city. And as I looked out the window, I could see that there were hundreds of journalists that came from around the world to cover the riots that were about to break out. And they were basically begging the Arabs, please do something to justify us coming here and try, they wanted to report on riots, but there was absolutely nothing happening. It was a completely peaceful day, beautiful day.
Would you compare? I used to do this in my articles. I got a lot of grief for it at the beginning. People criticized me. Would you compare Trump to Cyrus, King Cyrus? I mean, who paved the way for the Jews to build the Second Temple?
Absolutely,
Really?
I did in my book, Trump and the Jews. I wrote in the first chapter, I believe it was, first or the second chapter, about Harry Truman and how he was such a great president when it came to Israel. He emotionally and biblically connected with Israel. But and I thought, I was saying, Trump is the best president in terms of U.S.-Israel relations since Harry Truman. But then, what was notable about Harry Truman, that when he met with the chief rabbi of Israel, the chief rabbi compared him to King Cyrus. He compared Truman to King Cyrus.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Wow.
And Truman was moved. Truman was in tears. But then along came Trump, and he outdid Truman in terms of that connection with Israel.
Truman actually was not a lover of the Jews. It's actually a fascinating story. He was not pro-Jewish at all. But he did do an amazing service for creation of the state of Israel, as opposed to Trump, who is clearly, although there are many the dissenters who claim that he's anti-Semitic and he's this and he's that. Clearly, there is no closer president to the Jewish people than Donald J. Trump. And I'm not talking just because of his family members and his tradition in his family. He was clearly very, very attached to the Jewish people, still is, and we hope that he will come back again.
Mark Zell told me that they had a campaign event in the Old City specifically because he wanted that connection with the Old City of Jerusalem, and then he would show that video at all of his campaign events in America. The video of overlooking the Kotel. So
so of course his enemies would say, well, he was just being deceitful. He's just trying to use it for campaign fodder. But the reality is this. Look. Let me just say one quick thing here about Truman. I don't know what Truman thought about Jews personally. I can't get into his heart. I judge people by their actions, and his actions were great in being the first world leader to recognize the resurgent state of Israel, and Trump, all of the critics, who called him all kinds of names and referred to him as an anti-Semite or pandering to anti-Semites. Well, if Biden isn't pandering to anti-Semites by pretending that Antifa is just an idea, then I don't get into the inside, what's in their hearts. I judge people by their accomplishments. Right. And Trump's accomplishments as president were tremendous, just tremendous as far as I think his accomplishments on a lot of other things were tremendous too, but specifically focused on the Middle East, Israel, his accomplishments were tremendous.
Yeah, we have this going joke, and I'm probably going to have to do tshuva on this joke on Yom Kippur, but we say, what's the difference between Donald Trump and liberal American Jews? Donald Trump has Jewish grandchildren. And it's tragic and it's true, but it also says something. I very much appreciate that you said it's coming from the heart. A lot of what he does for the Jews comes from his heart. I also found out that his father of blessed memory, when he built a project in, I think it was Queens or Brooklyn, in New York, he donated land for a synagogue. And I spoke to a woman whose father was the rabbi at that synagogue, and she said Donald Trump's father showed up at every yearly fundraiser and gave money to the synagogue. He showed up with his wife, and the rabbi would stop in and visit frequently. They became dear friends, and they would attend each other's family events. It was he learned it in the family. To say that he's anti-Semitic is so absurd, and I love the fact that you pointed out that it comes from his heart. That was, I think,
and also, Trump has always gotten a lot of criticism because of his character. The character issue has always been a problem for him, and I from my research in writing Trump and the Jews, I can tell you that there are a lot of things in his character that you can criticize, but there are also a lot of things in his character that aren't recognized, such as the values that he acquired from his father, the value of hard work, the value of respecting other people, the value of being frugal, and passing that along to your children, about how they have to work hard. Even though he was a millionaire, he was born into a millionaire family, but he worked hard. He worked very hard in building up his business, and he managed to pass along those values to his children. And I think that's something that should be praised. And in fact, even Hillary Clinton praised it. It was the one thing that she was forced to praise in that debate because of the question that she was asked. Look, I think we haven't heard the last of Donald Trump.
Right. We
will be hearing a lot more.
We actually had a question about that. Sina Trover, she commented, "Please don't give up on Trump yet." So, Dave, you've really gone into this. What do you think is going to be happening? I mean, Israel needs Trump. I think Trump needs Israel. What do you think is going to be happening with him over the next couple years?
I think we're going to see him running running to support the candidates in the congressional elections in 2022. And I think if we see some positive results for the GOP in 2022, I would virtually guarantee you that Trump will be running for president in 2024. I think that he will have a different running mate in that election.
Oh, really?
Possibly a woman would not surprise me. There are so many women who are quite accomplished among the new batch of Congress people.
Also, there's Nikki. There's Nikki.
Well, I don't know. Look, I really like Nikki Haley.
I do too.
And she has, she criticized Trump pretty strongly after January 6th, after the riots at the Capitol, and I understood it. I think it was a bit overblown, though, because as we now know, these attacks were premeditated, at least by the insiders who were there, and we know that there were, at least a couple of Antifa people and quite a few neo-Nazis who were rioting in the Capitol and performing these acts of violence, which they had done in the past in Charlottesville. But look, I don't think that we can blame Donald Trump. People could take issue with the fact that he continued pushing on the electoral fraud issue, even though it was clear he didn't have a chance of getting anywhere on it. But that's Trump. You have to understand, Trump is someone who pushes and pushes and pushes until he gets what he wants. And if he doesn't get what he wants, then you're going to be hearing from him again.
He is unstoppable. It's like he's not that much younger than Joe Biden, but the difference is astounding. And I just remember, not only did he run a campaign, but he had to run against the media. There was everything in the world was against him, and he just stood there and gave as good as he got, if not better.
It's clear that he was a workaholic. He was tweeting in the wee hours of the morning. He barely slept, and he was very involved in working, around the clock. We entitled this show "The Future of U.S.-Israel Relations," and we're talking about the past and Trump. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about what David thinks about the future of U.S.-Israel relations when it comes to the Biden administration in Israel and what's going to play out in the next 4 years.
I'm glad you asked, Josh. That subject terrifies me, so I was trying to avoid it. Okay, David, what do you say? I'll try not to cry.
Okay. Well, look, I'm laughing. I think it's very, very important to keep a sense of humor, no matter what is happening. Politics is a crazy business. It's a very serious one, but you have to understand that there is a lot happening. So, look, Biden, and as the head of the Democrat Party, is going to be shifting things quite substantially. He'll be shifting the goalposts, as they say. However, there's a limit to how much shifting he can do.
Is there really?
Yeah.
We're only 43 days into his administration, and he's already, I don't know if he's signed with Iran, but it's looking like that's happening, and it's going to be worse than before. One thing about the Iran deal people don't realize is it was signed in 2015, and it was a 10-year delay. So that means that in 2025, Iran will have a totally permitted, green-lighted nuclear weapons program. And 2025 is what, 3.5 years away? So he's already flipped over the Iran deal, the Iran accomplishment that Trump made.
That's true. Look, in my book, Trump and the Jews, I have an entire section about Iran. It's that important an issue. And the fact that Trump took a strong stand against Iran is very significant. But we can focus on that right now. And I'll tell you this. What will be different this time if Biden tries to re-enter that nuclear deal is that he won't just be going head-to-head with Benjamin Netanyahu or whoever is the prime minister after March 23rd, if for some reason it's not Benjamin Netanyahu. But look, that's a situation. That's how it was with Obama. It was head-to-head. But then the deal was signed with the insistence of Obama and John Kerry and Joe Biden. And now we have a different situation. There won't be a head-to-head. There will be 6 heads to 1 head, because all of these Arab countries, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Oman also, and Morocco and Sudan, and Egypt and Jordan, all these countries are very, very concerned about that deal, and are very concerned about Iran's race for a nuclear bomb. And they are forming a strategic alliance. They may call it an informal strategic alliance. It may be covert, but not really covert. And they are going to be standing with Israel together. And Israel will be standing with them in countering the Iranian threat. So, Joe Biden, he may be losing some of his faculties, but he's not a stupid guy. And I don't think that he wants to go against all these countries in the Middle East. Whether he'll be able to accomplish anything, how much power he actually has in his administration, that we don't know, because we don't see much of him. And it's we're halfway through the first 100 days, and he hasn't had one press conference. So, that's also a problem, don't you think?
It was reported yesterday or the day before that there was a deal made between, I think it was yesterday, between Israel and the United States, that Israel would not take any unilateral actions against Iran without first consulting with the U.S. Do you think that is what's going to happen? And what if the U.S. Under a Biden administration would say, do not do anything when it's necessary to do something?
Well, look, that issue is a problem. Israel has always, when its existential life was concerned, when it's a real existential issue, and when there is no time to spare, Israel has always taken military action if it needed to. And we can only hope that there will be cooperation between Israel's government and Joe Biden on this issue. But if there isn't, then Israel will take a stand. It's always been that way.
3 little points. One is that had Israel not taken unilateral action to take out the Osiris reactor in Iraq, American soldiers would have...
Iraq.
What?
Iraq. The
Iraq. Then American troops could have conceivably faced a nuclear weapon when they went in. Also, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll have to dig for this, there was a story that when Israel was preparing to take unilateral action against Iran, Obama tipped them off and told them about it, preempting the strike. So,
well, it's more than a story, but it's a little bit complicated because there were also a couple of members of Netanyahu's administration at that time
That's also true.
that were leakers within the Netanyahu administration and basically torpedoed that attack.
So
But look, it's not too late. If something needs to be done, it'll be a lot more challenging though than the attack on the Iraqi reactor was, and a lot more challenging certainly than the attack on the Syrian reactor was. And both of those attacks had to be made. And I guarantee you that Israel will do what needs to be done when the time comes. And it could be that the Biden administration may even passively stand by and, of course, criticize it afterwards.
Israel does have that character when it comes to these existential crises, because we don't have wiggle room. We don't have the freedom of being nice or like, and even left-wing Israelis, well, most left-wing Israelis realize that when their feet get put to the fire, that it's just too real here to let things slide.
Yeah, when it's an existential issue, all Israelis are on board.
Also, I was wondering, people have asked Biden about Jerusalem, whether he will move the embassy back to Tel Aviv. That's a hugely complicated issue because I'm not sure it's even legal, because that had to do with the Jerusalem Embassy Act. It wasn't that Donald Trump enacted it. He just allowed it to happen by not
He implemented the law. The law already was passed.
The law was passed in when was that? 80? Something like that?
No, I think it was like later than that. I think it was 96. But anyway, it was as Joe Lieberman was one of the co-sponsors of the bill, and it was actually pushed off every 6 months by all the presidents.
Right. So for him to remove the embassy from Jerusalem, I think is more sticky when it comes to the legalities than just signing an executive order. And he's been asked directly about it. I'm going to ask you a really difficult question, David, and I need a brave guy like you to answer it. And he's been asked directly if he would move the embassy back, and he said no, it was a wrong move to do it. He was very critical of it when the embassy was moved to Jerusalem, but he said, no, I'm not going to move it back. Do you believe him?
I believe that is his intention. I can't say more than that. Look, Biden may not be in control of his party, and he may not be in control of his administration. Maybe some people say, well, maybe it's not fair to say that, but I really have my doubts about how in control he is. I mean, the poor guy. I mean, he's struggling. He has his mental challenges at the moment. I'm not making fun of it. I feel for him, and he shouldn't have been running for president. I have a 95-year-old mother, who she has her issues with short memory loss. She forgets things sometimes, but she's 95 years old and she's not running for president. He ran for president for the most important position in the whole world. And he got elected because of coronavirus, and now he's president, and we have Kamala Harris on his heels, hoping to take his position. It's really
And there are people in his party, and powerful people who have a lot of sway, like Bernie Sanders. I believe Bernie Sanders said that he would move the embassy out of Jerusalem.
Bernie and the whole left wing of the party, they would absolutely remove the embassy from Jerusalem. And
how much power do you think that Kamala Harris has over the policy decisions that are being made?
She's running foreign policy now.
I think she has a tremendous amount of power. And it's ironic because in the Democratic primaries, she was only getting 1% of the vote, which is, so it's very ironic. But now she's become the poster girl for the Democratic Party. She and Jill Biden are gracing all of the fashion magazines.
Dr. Joe Biden. Dr. Joe Biden.
Yes. Thank you for that correction. I stand corrected.
Yeah. Will Kamala be running against Trump in 2024?
I think the chances are pretty good, but she'll have her opponents certainly, and well, who knows? Maybe Joe Biden is going to run again.
If they had elections next week, he'd have trouble. I don't know if he's up for it.
We're not talking about trouble. Keep him in the basement, and everything will be okay.
I also want to point out, from where I sit, having the U.S. embassy in Jerusalem is not for Israel's benefit. I like that David Friedman didn't need to travel too far to get to work. He had a very short commute. He actually has a personal apartment that he's owned for several years in Jerusalem. I also love the fact that David Friedman, I don't know if you realize this, but his middle name is Melech. His father.
Yeah, I know that. I wrote about that in Trump and the Jews also. The story is great. Yeah. It's a great story.
But I think by having the embassy in Jerusalem, America, the U.S., is drawing the energy from Jerusalem and benefiting enormously. I think that by connecting to Jerusalem, by moving the embassy, Donald Trump did a huge favor for his country. He was just, they're drawing the energy. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, from out of Zion will come teaching in the Torah, and he just plugged into the direct line of that.
Oh, absolutely.
It was for his country. It was totally for his country. So what do you think? I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Absolutely. The verse in Genesis that those who bless Israel will be blessed. It's a nice verse. It sounds good and people love to quote it. But we Jews who live here in the biblical heartland of Israel, we feel it, we live it, we breathe it every day. And I know a lot of wonderful people around the world whose only desire in life, or main desire in life, is to stand with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the way you do that is by blessing Israel, by standing with Israel. Not just blessing Israel by saying, yes, we love Israel. I remember I once spoke to a pastor. He said to me, "Oh yeah, we love Israel." And then I said to him, a few days later, I got in touch with him. I said, are you prepared for me to come speak in your church and speak to your congregants about what is happening in the biblical heartland of Israel today? And he hemmed and hawed, and I didn't end up speaking in that particular church. However, I've known many Christians, many Americans, many Canadians, many people around the world, Europeans, who have a love for Israel and truly want to bless Israel in unconditional ways. Okay, there are no strings attached to that support that they give. And the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund gets a lot of support from people all around the world, and we're very happy for it. And I really see this as a partnership of sorts. It's like Hollywood. It's like Hollywood, because in Hollywood, there's an award they give, which is Best Actor or Best Actress in a supporting role, and that's truly what those who stand with Israel and who want to directly support projects like the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund and truly getting active in politics and telling their politicians that they have to stand with Israel and stand with Israel in biblically consistent ways. And when they do that, I believe that there are rays that go right up to the Shemayim, right up to the heavens, because there is that connecting of the elements above with the elements below, the connecting of Christians, of Jews, of everything in between, and if it's on behalf of God's land and God's people, I guarantee you, he is sitting up there smiling when he sees that happen.
I think that you, David, you made a good point. That's very important to make, which is that you have to be consistent with the rules and the laws of the Torah. I've pointed out many times that every U.S. president in modern times, at least, has always said that they are pro-Israel. But there's a big difference between Carter and Obama's pro-Israel and Trump and Reagan's pro-Israel. So, everybody's pro-Israel, but the question is, what does that mean to be pro-Israel?
Carving out the biblical heartland of Israel and creating a state, an independent country for a band of terrorists is not biblical.
Oh, David, that's what I love about you. That's what I love about you. You don't pull any punches. You tell it like it is, in the face. Whether people can handle it, that's their problem. Fantastic.
Look,
David,
I Facebook is mentioning the ICC ruling against Israel and how Christians are mobilizing to support Israel. We thank them for that. As Rabbi Nachman Kahana points out, the ICC stands for the International Court of Criminals. So we hope that they fail at their attempts.
This was also that post. I don't want to mispronounce it, but Fantagi Ditoka is apparently connected to the ICEJ. And this is exactly what David was talking about. The ICEJ is the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem. And basically, when all of the embassies were leaving Jerusalem, they hung tough with us. They stayed with us. And that's the kind of faithful relationship that really bears fruit and overcomes any obstacle. I have enormous respect for them. They're amazing people. One of the tragedies was this year that they didn't have their amazing parade of nations, which you can see just people coming from all over the world. It's what I've seen Israelis, they stand on the side of this parade and just, they can't imagine that people from all over the world love Jerusalem that much. And we get to see that.
Have that. Excuse me, Eliyahu. I just want to point out that I have groups that come to visit Shiloh, right? Shiloh, same place. I have people who come to visit from around the world, and they come and I take them. I always tell them, send me an email first, so don't just show up at my door. But they get in touch with me. They come with their groups of tourists that, God willing, will soon be coming back to Israel, and I take them to our therapeutic educational campus, and they meet the children, and they go into a Bible lesson. They hear the children chanting from the Bible. They see what real faith is all about, and they see our projects for the terror victim children. Now, I have to tell you, they are terribly moved by it. And then after they leave, they go on their way. Sometimes I take them to ancient Shiloh, and sometimes they have to go on their way already. But there's usually somebody who comes up to me and says to me, usually one of the local Israelis, they come to me and they say, David, what is this about all these people coming from America or from Canada or wherever they're coming from? do they really care about Israel? And does it really come from the heart? And I tell them, yes, absolutely. It comes from the heart. And if it didn't come from the heart, they wouldn't be coming here to see me, because I'm very much a straight shooter. I want people who are going to be direct with me and honest with me and sincere with me, and I'm sincere with them. But it says those who bless Israel will be blessed, and that's what it's all about. And the blessings come through Israel. George Washington understood that, by the way.
I think that's why your prediction that we haven't seen the end of Trump will probably come true, because he blessed us pretty big, and I think he's going to get blessed with more amazing years in a very pretty house with a painted white with a domed roof that's very similar to the nice gold dome behind Josh. It's there's a strange similarity there. David, I can't thank you enough. I could sit here and talk with you all day, but we do have time limits. I'd like to have you back when we can talk specifically about your amazing projects. I like that you talk from the heart, you talk about the heart, and you're a straight shooter, and those are qualities that are seriously lacking in today's world. So I really appreciate that. Thanks so much for joining us, David. Thanks, Josh. You're amazing.
Thank you, Eliyahu, and thanks, Josh.
Thanks for all our viewers. And if you bless us, we have to bless you back. It's written down that way. That's the directions on the top of the box. We got no choice. So bless us, and it'll come right back at you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.